Welcome to Along This Road, a podcast about lessons I've learned about being different together while living as a nomad for over a decade. This episode is called Location, 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 and it's inspired by my dear friend and business partner, Peter, with whom I've been leading cultural travel tours since 2015. Peter and I have been all over the US, UK, and Europe with amazing people on incredible adventures. The two of us have a great deal in common, or we wouldn't have embarked on this venture, but like all individuals, we're also different. Without a doubt, the most interesting aspect of our journey together has been learning how to make our differences enhance both our friendship and our business. Peter's a massive film buff with a particular passion for film locations. Now, I enjoy film locations as much as the next person and even know a little something about them, having grown up with three parents in the industry, as well as through my dear friend Todd, who is one of the best location managers in the business. But Peter and some of his friends are seriously into the nitty-gritty. They track down the exact places where things were filmed, carrying around lists and photographs to prove it. I'm more or less good with this or that film was filmed in this area, now let's go to a museum. The folks who travel with us range from my level of interest to even more into the minutiae than Peter. As a tour leader, I need to be sure everyone's needs and interests are met. But one day in Madrid, I hit a wall. After we traipsed for 20 minutes through a dingy area of the city to find an ugly abandoned storefront that had once been a bar in a movie I'd never heard of and from the description was pretty sure I'd never want to see, I found myself wishing I was anywhere but there. To feel that in my own business was discomforting. After some thought, Peter and I decided that in the future, I would offer alternative activities for the non-location lovers when possible. But if that wasn't possible, I decided that no matter what, I would show up to everything with an open mind. As it all turned out, this wholehearted approach has led me to some of the best places I've ever visited. The day after our dingy, depressing shop front, we boarded a bus to a town I'd never heard of, in a part of Spain that held no particular interest for me, with the son of an actor, or maybe he was a director, who'd made movies I'd never seen. My friend Greg and I were the only people who had no idea where we were going or why. We got out of the bus in a dusty smattering of buildings that could barely be called a village and walked into a large walled complex, where we proceeded to visit one of the coolest places I've ever been. This was no tourist trap. The caretaker gave us a private tour of a long-abandoned monastery, the kind of place most people never get to see. In visiting all the film locations there, we also learned about the history of this religious order, the region, winemaking, and so much more. Everything about that visit was fantastic, and I thoroughly enjoyed trying to capture the mystique of the monastery in my photos. I had a huge smile on my face all day, as did my friend Greg. We still reminisce about how much we loved that day a decade later. Perhaps my all-time favorite location we visited was an unremarkable castle outside of Vienna. It was basically a mediocre 19th century recreation of an older site that had fallen into disrepair. It had been used in a film that even Peter admitted hadn't been very good. This was not, in my opinion, a ringing endorsement for a 2-hour drive, but as promised, I drove off with enthusiasm. The minute we got there, I was blown away by the location, on a sweeping bluff with views that stretched for 100 miles. But when I discovered that the site was also famous for a falconry exhibit, I quite literally jumped for joy. I love birds, so I ran to get my ticket not only to visit each of the birds in their natural enclosures, but also to watch their handlers let them soar out over the valley below and then land wherever they wanted. When the most gorgeous owl ended up right next to me, oh my God, I was over the moon. It was a spectacular afternoon, only to be repeated 2 days later at an actually gorgeous castle outside Salzburg, Austria, overlooking the snow-covered Austrian Alps, where even more birds soared into the blue. By this time, I was all in on any location Peter suggested. That said, there was one day that came as a complete surprise. We were leading a tour of American Werewolf in London, locations in Wales. Everyone was particularly excited to get to the site of some pub in the movie. Great, I thought to myself, I'll have a bite to eat while they check everything out. But when we arrived, there were literally 4 houses around a small circular green. No pub, no store, no nothing. So I said to the group as I parked the van, maybe 5-10 minutes here? I mean, how long could it take to look at a village with 4 houses? They all looked at me as though I'd suggested they leave their favorite movie before the end of the opening credits. "Oh, no," said one of them. "We'll need at least an hour, possibly more." "To do what?" I thought. "You bet," I said cheerfully. "I need a good stretch of the legs anyway." And off I traipsed for a glorious walk through fields and farms where I met a shepherd and his border collies, returning to find my location lovers all still deeply engrossed in figuring out what shot had been done where, happy as clams, as was I. From there, we went on to what might be the highlight of any tour I've led. A crossroads in a large, barren area of bluffs, where the group wanted to, wait for it, stand in the middle of the road and howl. This time, however, I said to them, "I hope you want to stay here for hours." And off I went, having looked at the miles of trails all around me. Yes, they did, fortunately, so I hiked way up into the hills, where I looked out on endless green valleys, finding myself surrounded by dozens of wild ponies who cheerfully followed me wherever I hiked. If there's one thing I love more than birds, it's horses. This was quite literally my childhood fantasy, being the Pied Piper of ponies. I was the one who was late to the van this time. But sometimes, I have to admit, I remain a little slow on the uptake. That's what my mother used to say each time it took me longer than it should to realize that someone else's view of the world might actually be better or more interesting than my own. Clearly, I was admittedly slow on the uptake about Peter's locations, and now I know that if Peter suggests I'll love something, he's inevitably right. He often reminds me of the tour day in Spain devoted to Salvador Dali. Not being the biggest Dali fan, I was ambivalent when we went to the Dali Museum. "Just wait till we get to his house," Peter said. Of course, it turned out to be spectacular, not to mention that it completely shifted my understanding of Dali's showman life and surrealist raison d'etre. I began this blog because our world needs to remember what Peter and his passion for locations have taught me. Life is better when we learn how to be different together. How ironic that a world bombarded by media purporting to offer us a planet of choices is being led by people asking us to winnow down our lives to a worldview that reflects their insular, self-centered, narrow, homogeneous beliefs. Our survival on this planet needs each of us to remember how to find joy in our differences instead of fearing them, as we're being told to do. This is what I love most about my nomad life. Every experience that requires me to step out of my comfort zone inevitably reminds me what a marvelous, diverse, exciting, beautiful planet full of complex, wonderful individuals we are. Why on earth would I want a world filled with people who look and think and act exactly like me? Different together is the only way to live along this road called life. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back next week with episode 4 of Along This Road, a podcast about lessons learned on the road of life.